Hey everyone, let's do something different. So here on this channel, which is like a second channel, but not really a channel, I've been putting these music playlists up. I've been doing them on like Apple Music and Spotify once a quarter. And then I've also been putting them up on YouTube. And initially I was putting them on my main channel and it was getting really confusing to have this like music playlist of other people's music along with all my other videos. And so I moved them over to this one, and this is kind of where it's at now. And I thought it might be fun to make a video talking about each of the songs that I pick per playlist and why I pick them, a little bit of something about the band to give you a bit of a background. I love retro games. I love talking about emulation and stuff like that, but my passion has always been music, like for my whole life. And so I think it would be just kind of fun to talk about that every once in a while too. So the way I'm envisioning it is that, every season I make this new playlist and it's usually 10 or 11 songs. And so I'll make a video talking about each of those songs and then also maybe some background in why and how I come up with these playlists in the first place. I've been doing these for years, like back in like the MySpace days and Facebook and Friendster, if you remember that. And so this is a very natural thing for me, but also kind of weird to actually talk about it. But I've got my playlist up here, so let's talk about each of these songs one by one. Now, I'm not really sure how I'm going to do this because I want to play the songs right now for you and then talk about it, but copyright and all that kind of stuff just seems a little bit wonky. So I'm just going to kind of funnel that over to the actual music itself. And so the playlist will have the music, and hopefully that will give, the rights holders a little bit of that money as well. And then also I'll just talk about each of these. So it'll be a little bit awkward. You may have to jump from one to the other, or maybe listen to the whole playlist, then listen to this, and then go back to the playlist. It's all up to you. Now, the first song on this list is from a band called Cumulus. They're based out of Seattle, and I'm originally from the Seattle area, more south of it, like Olympia, Tacoma area, but I moved away in 2000, and so I was part of the music scene and whatever back in the late 90s, but then moved away, to join the Navy. And so I've never been back really ever since, but I've always kept a finger on what's going on there. And mostly I had to, through friends who were still living there and be like, oh, I saw this show, this amazing band, check them out, that kind of thing. And so I've always kind of kept up with that stuff. And Cumulus is a band that's relatively recent. They've been around for, I think, around 10 years at this point. I think they are connected to the Anacortes music scene, which is like a little bit north of Seattle, and Bellingham as well, which is up by the Canadian border. And Anacortes is really interesting, and that's where I first heard about them because there's a band called The Lonely Forest that was out of that area, and they've been gone for a while, but a really interesting power pop and kind of indie pop band. And the bass player of Cumulus is actually the singer of Lonely Forest. He's been around forever as well. So I kind of heard about that through him. And then also this band opened up for another local Seattle band called Pedro the Lion. They're doing 30-year anniversary shows. And so this band opened up for him. So I heard about that. The song that we're going to be playing for this one is called Simple. And so this song feels like a great introduction to a summer playlist because it's nice and poppy, it's catchy, it's repetitive, and has a light kind of texture to it. And all of that is really important to me in a summer playlist because that's kind of what I'm into during the summertime. I want something that's comforting and maybe a little bit new and poppy, something that I can play with the windows down and maybe someone else in the car, that kind of thing. And I think this song, Simple, which is the first track of their most recent album, which came out earlier this year, is a really good kind of indicator of that because it's it's focused on the simple things in life and being kids and jumping on a trampoline, that kind of stuff. And so really fun song, and that's why I picked it for my number one. And I actually started my playlist with this song where I first heard this, back in the spring, and I was like, this is a summer jam right here. And so this was always going to be my number one song, but that started getting me thinking about, geography and location, which are really important to me when it comes to music. And so I started thinking about, Seattle and Tacoma, the areas that I'm from originally. And so I thought about, okay, what do I want to add here on top of this and kind of segue to something else? And so my first thought was a band called the Wailers. So this is a band from the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. They were started that whole rock and roll craze, but in the Tacoma, Washington area, which is where my dad is originally from. And so I don't know, I got this really kind of neat picture of the Wailers back in the day and my dad kind of rocking out to them, when he was a kid. But anyway, this band is not really that well known. They kind of had a couple hits back in the late 50s, early 60s, and they were one of the first bands to popularize the song Louie Louie, which was I don't think they wrote it, but a lot of bands at this time in the early 60s were playing it. It was a standard, and we used to hear it at baseball games and stuff. So it just feels very Tacoma to me. And so I wanted to put a Wailer song on here, and the one that I picked is one called Out of Our Tree, which was a later song from them, mid-60s, but a little bit on the psychedelic side, but has a lot of complexity and kind of depth to it. And so That's why I ended up picking that one, is just kind of moving on from this simple song over to something that's a little bit more complex from like a hardened rock and roll band from the 60s. And so it also has a kind of nice summer driving feel to it. And so that's why I picked that one. And you'll see that as I go through my playlist, I'm going through like moods and ideas. And so the third song for this one was from a band called the Rural Alberta Advantage. They're a Toronto band. This song is like maybe 15 years old, but they're a really cool, interesting band. So they're a three-piece. There's like one guy who sings, plays guitar. There's a girl who helps sing and then also plays keyboards, but she does like the bass kind of notes with that. And then there's a drummer who's like this amazing drummer. He like plays so fast and so hard, and he's a big guy too. And he plays on this like small drum set. And I saw them play in DC, about 15 years ago. And it's just hilarious. This huge guy just like banging on this, like, it almost feels like a toy drum set. So really amazing. I think that drummer is like a lawyer as well, which is always kind of like an interesting thing for me. Anyway, this song is called Stamp. It's from their second album, and these guys are kind of known as being like a more driving, almost punk sounding band, but not with all those instruments. And there's also an element of like folk punk or like acoustic punk to these guys that I've always felt. A lot of it is the drums really driving things, but it does kind of remind me of Violent Femmes, but a little bit more kind of emotive. Like, I don't want to say the word emo, but kind of similar to that. And so I've always really loved this band since their first album, which came out, around mid-2000s. And then ever since then, they've always been really great. This song, Stamp, I chose it because it kind of carries on that driving force of the second song from the Wailers and just kind of moves on into something that just kind of explodes. And I really like this song in particular because the first half of it is just all build up. Like, they're just building up and it's getting more and more and more. And then it just dies and it goes straight to just guitar and singing. And it just kind of has this moment of respite. And I've always really loved that. And I felt like that was a good time to just kind of build up, explode, and then drop back down, and then build up again. And so that's why I put Stamps as my number 3. Really good song, really good band, really good album. So definitely check it out. So then after that, I felt like, okay, that's like a first 3 song kind of build up, and so let's take a break. And so at that point, I added a Mac DeMarco song. So this guy's pretty well known. He's like a, I don't know, he's like a free floating, like, light, soft rock kind of guy. He's been around for, 10, 15 years now. And I think he's pretty well known. I've only really known his like really early stuff. He's from British Columbia, I think originally, so Canadian, but grew up in Alberta or something like that. Anyway, again, location and like, that kind of stuff is really important to me. But anyway, so this one was kind of neat. It kind of just fell into my radar because one of the singers in my band, I play in a band, he texted me and he had this song. It's called Home from Mac DeMarco. It just came out maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he's like, hey, look, it's old Russ. Like, Mac DeMarco stole your sound. And the reason why he wrote that is because like when I first moved here to Hawaii, like early 2000s, after, leaving Washington and joining the Navy, going to boot camp and stuff, I was stationed here at first. And it was kind of interesting, but, I played a lot of like solo shows. It was just me and a guitar and stuff. I played in bands back in the day. They were all terrible. But I started, trying to play here in Hawaii and just try to get a feel for the local scene. There's not a lot of like indie rock or anything going on in Hawaii. It's mostly like punk rock at the time was really big. And then also like all that like reggae style music, they call it Jawaiian here. And those obviously weren't my scenes, but something a little bit lighter and softer. And so I started playing some shows and stuff. And I met these other guys. They were playing this other band called Little Jeans at the time. And so I would like, play shows with them. And I had a kind of warbly voice back then. I kind of sing at like a higher register. And that's exactly what we have here with this Mac DeMarco song. It's very like kind of soft and laid back. It almost feels like he's sitting in a boat, kind of drifting down like a really lazy river as he's playing. And so I really liked that overall sound. And so I thought that was a good kind of 4th song break with a summer playlist. Again, kind of envisioning this idea of kind of just in sunny weather and like, on a boat and whatnot. And so I picked that song for that. Now, one of the things about this song is that it has this really nice plucky bass line to it. And it's like the driving force of the song, if you were to ask me. Like, I can hear that more than anything else in terms of instruments when I'm thinking about it. And so I really like that kind of capturing of the sound, that kind of plucky, almost driving sound in a very lazy song. And so I thought, let's go pluckier. Like, let's kind of move towards something that is more inspiring with bass for our 5th song. And so my 5th song is also a pretty well-known song. It's called I Have Been to the Mountain by Kevin Morby. This guy is from the Midwest, I think, originally, and but he lives like in Brooklyn, so a lot of Brooklyn musicians and stuff. And the bass in this album in particular is called Singing Saw, which came out 10 years ago. And this song in particular, I Have Been to the Mountain, is just crazy. Like, it is so driving, it is so fun, and very plucky as well. And so this is what kind of chose me to pick this song as my next one. And I thought it was kind of a good summer vibe song too, because it's talking about like, I've been to the mountain. It's like being outdoors, you know. And I don't know lyrically what's going on with this song. I don't actually focus on lyrics that much. It's more about the sound and the feeling of it. But anyway, I just love the driving, plucky bass in this album in particular. And this bass player, he's played for a lot of other people. He's like a studio musician, but he's done a lot of Kevin Morby's work, and I love it. And he like played bass or maybe guitar for like Shakira at some point, which is just kind of a funny aside. But either way, that's why I picked this song. I love the bass line on it. It's just so driving. It is so beyond what I would be able to play as a bass player, and that's why I love it so much. It's like something to aspire to because it just sounds so awesome. Now, this is an 11-song playlist. Usually I do 10 songs, but I just felt like in the end it needed a little bit extra oomph. But either way, that means that with 11 songs, we have a specific center song, like a middle song. And so for this one, I chose something that I thought would be just really interesting and again, very poppy and summery. So for this one, I chose the song 1901 by Phoenix. This is a French band, and this song was big, like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago at this point. I mean, like, I think this song got like a best indie album, like Grammy back in the day. And so it was a big song. This was one of the big hits from it, 1901. And I just love it. It's just so catchy, you know, like I was making this playlist and I was playing it along in my car, and my wife and kids were in the car at one point, and they were like singing along to it. And it's not anything other than the fact that this is a well-known song and they really loved it. And so I think it really captures the whole spirit of like kind of a summer playlist. It's just a lot of fun. It's poppy. It's also kind of reminiscent of days before, you know, being that it's a bit of an older song. And so I like that nostalgia kind of twinge to it as well. So that's why I picked this one. Okay, so moving along, I kind of wanted to keep this whole vibe going of like a nice summertime song, something poppy, something popular. And so I went with Moving in Stereo by The Cars. Now, this album, you know, came out in 1978, so a couple years before I was born, but it's an incredible album. I didn't hear about it until much later in life, but it's got like all the hits on it. You know, it's got My Best Friend's Girl and Just What I Needed. Like all those are on that first debut album. And it's just crazy how good this thing is just out of the gate. And Moving in Stereo was not a huge hit for them, but it was the song that's playing in Fast Times at Ridgemont High when Phoebe Cates is like coming out of the pool, the very iconic scene, right? This is the song that's playing. And so again, very summery feeling with that pool and water and everything else. And so that's why I put that one on here. It's, I think, the longest song on here, but it has this nice groove that kind of establishes itself as like, okay, this is a summer playlist. We're just going to kick back and enjoy this moment. Now, once I got to this point, I was like, all right, now I need to start changing things up, and I can either go softer or more aggressive or, you know, try something else. And so I went with more aggressive. So this is a band called Meatwave. They're from Chicago, and I love this band. They have, I think, 4 albums out. This one came out 2017 or so. This was my favorite album of the year when it came out. This is a 3-piece band, just a trio, and there's just so much energy and just kind of anxiety in this album. It's really good. But I picked this album, again, that summertime vibe, mostly because of the lyrics, which I honestly don't ever really listen to in songs, but this one really stands out because it's very simple. The song is called Leopard Print Jet Ski, and the first lyrics are like, on my leopard print jet ski, finally free. And I just love that idea. It's like, you can't be free until you are on a jet ski, like in the water. You know what I mean? Like, I just love that idea of like, that's what somebody needed, was a leopard print jet ski. And once they're on that, then they're finally free. Now, the rest of the song is kind of talking about like the anxieties of kind of looking at everything that's good in life and then kind of being terrorized by that and being like afraid of it. And so this is a very aggressive song. I always like to put at least one kind of heavy hitter in every playlist, and this is my choice right here. Really good album. If you like hard music, check out Meatwave, and this album in particular is called The Incessant. It came out in 2017. Super good. Okay, at this point I felt like, all right, time to wind down a little bit, right? Get to the last 3 songs on the album. And this jet ski one in particular, it actually goes and kind of blends into another song on the album. And so the drummer like really picks it up and starts hitting the snare pretty hard. And so I was like, let's toss it up and actually like make it completely different. And so I went with like a really soft song. So this drummer's like going off, and then it goes into the next song, which is just like this acoustic, softer song from a guy named Chris Staples. Now, Chris Staples has been around for a while. He actually was a singer of a band from Pensacola, Florida called 238, which was like this indie emo style band. Just around that time where things were getting really popular with that kind of sound. And they were one of those bands. I never really listened to them that much. In hindsight, I've listened back and I'm like, oh, it's a pretty good band, But it never really hit me at the time. I was mostly focused on like Seattle area music, and Pensacola is about as far from Seattle as you can get geographically. But I heard about Chris Staples later on because he moved to Seattle and started his own like solo music, and he's been doing that for 10, 15 years. And it's all really good, very soft, very simple. I've always really enjoyed the sound that he creates with his songs, so really good. It's also funny that I really got into Chris Staples while I was living in Pensacola, Florida, which is where he's from, but was living in Seattle. And so very kind of interesting. But I love this song, very soft. Also a newer song. I think it's an album that's coming out here later this year, and this is one of the singles from it. So yeah, just a nice kind of floating, softer song. And I thought that was a good reprieve from the jet ski song that we had just been listening to. So after that, I only had like a song or two left. And I thought, okay, let's put in another kind of very summertimey song that reminds me of summer in particular. And so I went with Heavy Metal Drummer by Wilco from their album Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. Now, this is a really interesting album. There's a whole like documentary about like how it was made and whatnot, but they like were dropped from their label and then they released it on their website. And remember, this is 2001, so early days of the internet, and they just had it streaming on their website. You could listen to it. This is like mid 2001, and then you could buy it from there, I believe. And then from there, they actually got like onto a label and released as a CD. But I remember having the MP3s of that album somewhere in late 2001, which was when I first moved here to Hawaii. And I remember my first Christmas was here in Hawaii, and it was such a weird feeling because it's like summertime outside, but like Christmas, And I had just moved to the island. I didn't really have any friends yet, but like my roommate, in the barracks, he had some friends and they were all going to like a beach, like kind of lodge, like a little cabin. And so they're hanging out for Christmas. And so I went and hung out with them. And it was just so weird to be on the beach on Christmas time. And I remember I brought this CD. I like burned it to a CD. And so we listened to this album. And it was just a weird kind of moment. I remember when Heavy Metal Drummer came on, which is easily like the most like poppy and kind of accessible song on this album, which is a kind of deep album. Like I really love it. But yeah, this song in particular just reminds me of sitting at the beach on Christmas in the summertime. And yeah, so that's why I put it on here, just because it kind of reminded me of that moment. And I, really enjoy this album as well. So after that, I felt like it wasn't a good song to end the playlist with, so I wanted to do one more song. So I picked Miniature Tigers, which is a New York City-based band, I think Brooklyn, and they've been around forever. They're like a MySpace band, so they like met each other over MySpace and then released their music on MySpace and got big from that. There's very few bands that got big from MySpace, but they're one of them. I think The Format is another one. And I think those two bands toured together at some point. Either way, indie pop kind of band, more leaning on the pop side. And especially lately, they've kind of gone into this slightly psychedelic side, a little bit stoner rocky, but then also poppy. And so this song that I'm putting here as my last song on the playlist is called ZZZ, and it's it's from their most recent album, came out a couple of years ago, and has that more kind of stonery vibe, but still very summer feeling. And all the songs are usually about lamenting lost love, and this one is like that as well. So I thought it was a nice kind of melancholy in the summertime kind of song, and so that's why I picked it. It's the way to kind of cap off this playlist. Anyway, I ended up talking way more about this music than I expected, but I hope you found this at least informative and helpful in kind of learning about these new bands if they're new to you, and just kind of the music that I choose when I make one of these playlists. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. I don't think a lot of people are going to watch this video, but if you do, I'd be really interested to hear what you think about some of these bands. And there are so many awesome songs and bands out there, and it's really hard to kind of whittle it down to 10 or 11, but it's always a very fun process. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, and yeah, we'll see you next time.